Thanks for the invitation, Bettina and Britta. I'm really excited to show you a very niche topic of my overall research project on human-machine relations in diabetes management. And to start, I would love to show you my slides, and I hope it works. Maybe you can nod if you can see them somehow, somewhere. Perfect. Okay, and as Britta has already mentioned, the topic of today's talk is voicing the machine-constructed dialogues with algorithmic diabetic devices. And I've already mentioned this is like, a topic I'm just diving into within the overall bigger research project on human-machine relations. And I found some very interesting instances in the data that I'm having that I'm going to discuss a little bit later with you. So I just want, to send this off as a little warning or announcement that this is a work in progress data session, more or less, where I specifically want, or I'm happy about your input on what you might see in the data snippets that I'm going to show to you today. Which I ordered in a certain kind of way, but maybe you have like a different perspective, a different viewpoint. Maybe you can see more things than the things that I already have seen in the data. So just to clarify what I'm talking about, because maybe some of you aren't too experienced with diabetic devices and what algorithmic diabetic devices are. So here's a little input on that. So you're seeing pictures here, and these pictures show a very specific way of managing diabetes. Like currently, roughly, we have 420 million people on Earth with diabetes. I think you all know what diabetes is, especially type 2 diabetes, where your pancreas is starting to fail you. And depending on the level of diabetes that you're having, you need, some pills, or you need to work out more, eat in a different way, or you might need insulin input. I'm specifically talking about people having type 1 diabetes. It's roughly 10% of the 420 million that we talked about. And people with type 1 diabetes have a different kind of diabetes where the pancreas just stopped producing insulin. So it's an autoimmune disease where you need insulin to come into your body from outside in various kind of ways. So you could have needles or pens, so-called pens, and inject insulin, several times a day. Or, and this is what you can see here on the pictures, you could use an insulin pump, which is connected to your body with a catheter and a needle. And the insulin is stored in the insulin pump and is delivered accordingly, depending on what you tell the insulin pump to do. The newest developments in type 1 diabetes treatment, also type 2 diabetes treatment, but I'm focusing on type 1, are that you have so-called continuous glucose sensors, also called CGM in German. All my data is in German. So these sensors are measuring your blood sugar continuously. And in the very, very newest developments, it was officially approved only 2 to 3 years ago. There are systems in which these continuous glucose sensors, these continuous glucose monitors, are communicating with the insulin pump. So the insulin pump can read the data from the continuous glucose sensors and adjust the insulin delivery into your body accordingly. Yeah. So if your blood sugar is too high, the insulin pump can do something about it and deliver more insulin to you. If your blood sugar is too low, the insulin pump can cut off the insulin supply completely. So these systems are more and more, or are having more and more agency in terms of decision making, how much insulin you might need at a specific point in time, yeah, or if you need no insulin at all. And I find this this specific and very vital human-machine assemblage, this very specific form of human-machine relation, very intriguing because firstly, these devices are connected to your body. And secondly, these devices are connected to your body 24 hours a day. Yeah, you can unpatch them at some point, maybe at the catheter, but you still have the catheter there and the needle there, and the continuous glucose sensors are patched to your body like the whole time. So only in times of changing them, like every 10 to 14 days, you get rid of them for a couple of minutes, but then you want them back on your body to know what your blood sugar level is. And in the overall project, I'm interested in how people using these devices draw discursive boundaries between their bodies and the machines, how they interact with the machines on a daily basis, and also what kind of emotional attachment they might have to them. Yeah, so these are the questions of the general research project. The data that I gathered so far in this project is from March 22, and I did the last interview in August 23, so last year. And it's overall 32 qualitative narrative interviews with people with type 1 diabetes using such a so-called loop system. Yeah, sometimes they're called hybrid loop systems, sometimes they're full loop systems. And I talked to people that did these loop systems by themselves, the so-called looper community, the do-it-yourself community of these systems, and to people that use the officially released systems that are, as I said, only 2 to 3 years old and still evolving. The interviews were happening in Zoom or in the participants' homes, depending on where they were located, 40 to 95 minutes long. And I had like a semi-structured layout. So we generally talked about something I called the diabetes biography. So when was the day you were diagnosed? How did everything come along, etc. Then contact with diabetes management devices and technology in diabetes management, the development of these kind of technologies, and how they assess the growing interventions that these kind of technologies can do on their own. Then, of course, we talked about bodies and technologies and relationship with these specific kind of technologies. What I also gathered so far, but that's not too important for the talk today, is complementing ethnographic research, where I go to medical conferences dealing with type 1 diabetes and specifically dealing with technology use in type 1 diabetes management, and community meetings of people where people meet having this kind of technology on their body and with them, and how they interact and how the technology might play a role in these kind of community interactions, and how community builds around technology as well. So these are the thematic fields that emerged in the interviews. You could say that after a very long coding process, these might be like the 4 very general main codes that emerged from the data. So people talked a lot about agency, human agency in comparison to the machine agency. Of course, bodies and technologies were also a core category that emerged, like how does the technology relate to the body? Is it part of the body? Is it something outsourced? Trust and control, specifically regarding the growing agency of the devices in insulin delivery or insulin cutoff, and evaluations and attitudes regarding the development of technology, safety issues that are coming along with it, and also issues regarding what it means to be a human that is, having these kind of devices on and with them 24 hours a day. So today, as my title suggests, I want to focus on constructed dialogue in these interviews, and it's specifically dialogues where humans perform a dialogue with their algorithmic diabetic device. And this is very interesting because constructed dialogue research has shown us specific aspects that come along when we listen to narratives or listen to utterances, and constructed dialogue is part of these utterances. So very early on, these kind of utterances were called reported speech. So something was reported in, current speech that we're listening to at this moment. But this notion was, abandoned the latest in the 90s when Schifrin said, well, constructed dialogue means that we are speaking for another. Günther says, or Günther, that it's a polyphonic layering of voices. And specifically, Tannen's work, I think, made a very big impact in recognizing, constructed dialogue, animation of dialogue and conversation, not as reported speech, but as something that is recontextualizing words in current discourse. And these recontextualizations have very specific forms. We can look at pitch, amplitude, intonational contours, voice quality of the one who is reported or who is constructed by using words that they might have said, pronoun choice, of course, and other linguistic markers. And it's specifically interesting that what is happening when we look at constructed dialogue, that basically the speaker constructing this dialogue is verbally positioning themselves as another speaker, and thus constructing this other speaker, but also constructing themselves as a current speaker in discourse. And I chose this citation of Tannen, this last one, because she also mentioned that we could talk about non-speakers in constructed dialogues, pre-verbal children or pets. Yeah? So sometimes maybe that we let our cats or pets speak in forms of constructed dialogue. But I think it's specifically interesting also to look at how speakers construct machines or their medical devices in these instances of constructed dialogue. And, this is going along with Pennycook's notion on post-humanist applied linguistics. And I think constructed dialogues and looking at constructed dialogues could help us to analyze one discursive form of focusing on assemblages and relationality between people and their objects. And it might tell us something about the voices speakers do give to their medical devices, because these medical devices don't have a voice, or they have a very specific, narrowed down voice. Yeah, they have a sound maybe, but not a voice. It's also interesting to just look at the imaginary of the machine as a participant or an alter in verbal interaction, and how they are portrayed as such in these instances of constructed dialogue. And then finally, as I said, it also reveals something about the speakers themselves and how they position themselves, maybe towards the machine, but also towards the discourse of interaction that is going on in the interview situation, maybe. So these are the broad questions, and we'll see if I can find answers to all of them, or if we get some indications towards like where this analysis could move. And as I said, now we are going to look at maybe a lot of data or some instances of data, and I would be very happy to hear your thoughts about what you are seeing and hearing there. The transcription of the data is not finalized yet, so it's still a very basic transcription, sometimes without pauses, sometimes with pauses. So if you could focus on the instances where constructed dialogue is happening, then you can follow the inverted commas that somehow mark that there is something like a dialogue in the discourse of interaction of the interview happening. The data is in German. I translated the data snippets for you, but we will also listen to them in German, because I think specifically questions of prosody, of intonation might be interesting here. So even though you might not understand or speak German, maybe you can hear something when it comes to the passages in the inverted commas. So let's have a look at, the first data snippets. And this is where the medical devices actually talk. Yeah, so I call this talking devices. And this is from, Petra, 37 years old, and she's talking about like how she manages her eating breakfast, for example, together with the machine. And we can see constructed dialogue here at this passage. Yes, okay, 2 now, 4 later. This is what the machine says, and then she's answering the machine. And I want you to closely listen to how it sounds, what she's saying.
Und dann sagt er, ja, okay, 2 jetzt, 4 später. Und ich sage, na, dann komme ich bei 300 an. So können wir nicht arbeiten. So, und dann werde ich wütend auf das Gerät, dann steigert sich meine schlechte Laune.
Yeah. So I think and this is, just what I see. As I said, you can add to that maybe later on. We see very short, maybe even elliptic utterances done by the machine. Ja, okay, 2 jetzt, 4 später. Yes, okay, 2 now, 4 later. And this is units of insulin that, the machine is proposing to give to the participant. And then she answers, well, then I'll get to 300, which is a blood sugar level, which is really high. We can't work like this. Ja, so können wir nicht arbeiten. And this kind of machine speech, which is very short, very on point, a little bit elliptic, I think is what is striking here, but also that she uses conversational markers like yes, okay, to signal like involvement and interaction of the machine. Yeah, that doesn't have like only a communicative function in terms of communicating a message, but also a relational function in interaction. The same speaker later on is performing another constructed dialogue with her device. And it's interesting that she also says he, because she's basically always calling her system the algorithm, der Algorithmus. Yeah? So let's listen to that as well.
Und dann fängt er an, mir zu sagen, Blutzucker ist niedrig, nimm mal eine Notfall-BE. Und dann sage ich immer, nein, ich bin noch am Frühstücken, weil ich brauche ja den Essabstand. Das heißt, wenn ich dem Gerät sage, jetzt esse ich, dann ist es eigentlich erst 20 Minuten später.
I think what we can also see here, it's simple main clauses, but it's also striking that the device is using like modal particles, like mal, which is really hard to translate to English. Like in German, we have a lot of modal particles that in that case mitigate the imperative of take an emergency BU, which is like a bread unit. So something that you need to eat to get your blood sugar up again. We have more instances of constructed dialogues where the devices are actually speaking or talking. Hendrik and Hannes are 2 more snippets of data, and it's very interesting that the devices use a rather colloquial voice, a colloquial language. And maybe you can find that as well when you listen to the constructed dialogue, specifically after it says I didn't get a value, after ich habe nach 20 Minuten keinen Wert bekommen.
Gut, es meldet sich mal dann irgendwann, wenn es halt keinen Kontakt mehr hat zum Sensor, zum CGM. Sagt, ey, ich habe 20 Minuten keinen Wert bekommen. Jetzt, wo bist du?
So the machine is saying, hey, I didn't get a value after, I didn't get a value for 20 minutes now. Where are you? Yeah? I feel this is a very direct and rather colloquial way of performing the voice of a machine, where we could maybe expect, hypothetically at least, that it would talk to us in a rather formal voice, maybe. And now let's listen to Hannes.
Es gibt bestimmte Alarme, zum Beispiel, wenn ich zweimal die gleiche Menge Insulin abgeben will, 2 mal 2 Einheiten innerhalb von 5 Minuten, sagt das System, hey, stopp, hast du eben schon gemacht, ist das richtig?
So here in the hey, stop, and in English it's hey, stop, you did that already, is that right? That's also like, as I feel, a very colloquial way of relation to the person that the machine is addressing, yeah? In a very direct way and very informal way. All right, and then I think not finally, but almost finally, for the talking aspects, we have Britta. And Britta says the following to her machine. Or the machine says the following to Britta, sorry.
Ist natürlich noch eine andere Kategorie, wo die Pumpe dann auch sagt, da bist du jetzt zu hoch, also das machen wir jetzt mal wieder runter. Ich habe noch nie, muss ich ganz ehrlich sagen, noch nie so ein gutes H1C gehabt, wie seitdem ich diese Pumpe besitze.
So what I would, tentatively say to this snippet is that it's very interesting what kind of prosody Britta is using. A rather high-pitched account of the pump, yeah. Oh, you're too high now, so let's bring that down again. And again, also a colloquial expression. So the pump is saying and it says jetzt mal wieder. So something like let's bring that down again. And the mal is also a modal particle again. So as with the other examples, the pumps are talking to us in the imagined constructed dialogues very colloquially, informally.
Sorry, Rita, can
Yes.
we listen to it again because of the intonation?
Ah, yes, of course. Wait a second.
Ist natürlich noch eine andere Kategorie, wo die Pumpe dann auch sagt, da bist du jetzt zu hoch, also das machen wir jetzt mal wieder runter. Ich habe noch nie, muss ich ganz ehrlich sagen, noch nie so ein gutes H1C gehabt, wie seitdem ich diese Pumpe besitze.
Yeah, and I think specifically that's why I put a little bit of context afterwards. It's interesting how she goes down with her voice, like and the pitch in her, like Britta voice. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Apart from instances where we have like a proper constructed dialogues with the devices as talking machines, we have constructed dialogues in which the machines are somehow constructed as beeping devices. And that is something that appears even more often in the overall corpus, that there is some kind of an assumed interaction, but the pump doesn't engage with the voice. And if it participates, it can only participate in the mode of beeping. So verbal interaction in this, human-machine interaction scenes that are, portrayed in the interview situation are restricted to the human part of interaction. So it's kind of a one-sidedness towards the interaction. Let's listen to Jana.
Ich tue doch, was viele andere auch tun und spreche mit meinen Geräten stellenweise.
Okay.
Also, doch, es ist so dieses, keine Ahnung, Pumpe piepst und dann sagt man mal so, ja, ich habe dich gehört, ich kümmere mich gleich drum. Oder, ach, ich weiß schon noch, was du von mir willst. Oder, ach ja, stimmt, ich muss ja die Batterie wechseln. Oder, ach, sei doch ruhig. Oder, keine Ahnung, beim Sensor, wenn der piepst und ich halt weiß, er liest falsch, so als Reaktion, erzähl doch keinen Blödsinn oder, ne, also diese Interaktion mit dem Gerät und auch eine direkte Ansprache.
Okay, that was longer than the citation, but it's striking, and this is just one example where the interactional part of the pump or the device is considered, in this little narrative in the interview as something the pump is doing, and then the answers that are coming from the human part in these kind of interactions, they are enacted or constructed as something dialogical, yeah. But the pump and the device doesn't speak. I'm sorry for this very long extract, but I thought it was very interesting also in terms of performing the beeping voice of the pump. So specifically this first instance of, I don't know if I transcribed that correctly, but it sounds like neep, 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 is interesting here in Linda's account.
Dann macht sie nochmal deutlich auf sich aufmerksam und macht und darauf, also da wird man auf jeden Fall wach. Also das. Und dann ist es aber meistens auch entweder der Blutzucker steigt extrem, dann ist es vielleicht der Katheter ist abgeknickt und sie warnt einen dann eben, oder man hat einen ganz niedrigen Blutzucker und man reagiert nicht, und sie weiß natürlich nicht, wenn ich was trinke oder esse, wenn ich unterzuckert bin. Und da muss man manchmal auch praktisch, es ist interessant, während ich darüber spreche, merke ich das eigentlich, auch wieder sowas, dass sowas Kindliches ist, weil ich dann auch ihr Piepen ignoriere, weil ich genau weiß, ich habe jetzt schon was getrunken, und dann praktisch wie so in dem Moment die Verantwortung übernehme, zu sagen, ja, ja, danke, aber ich weiß, ich habe das jetzt schon gemacht und wir musste jetzt noch kurz ein bisschen piepen und dann ist wieder gut so, ja. Also, ja.
It's a very long account, but what I found very interesting is, on the one hand, as I said, the performing the pump as a beeping device, but then also how you react to it, and this thematic point of the medical devices being somehow childlike is something that is repeating itself in the corpus, and I really didn't expect that, because if you think about medical devices managing your blood sugar levels, you possibly wouldn't think of children, and that you react to them like there would be children. And this is what we find in this as well. And I try to categorize this a little bit differently, because here the devices also don't get a voice in the constructed dialogues, which they are part of. And usually these stories, these kind of constructed dialogues, where only the human is allowed to speak, revolve around the fact that the devices are annoying, yeah? That they are bugging you, that they want something from you, but you don't want them to, address you in interaction. So Joachim is saying the following.
Wir haben ein kleines Grundstück im Garten und am Arbeiten oder am Werkeln gestartet und auch körperlich unterwegs, und da passiert dann auch häufig, da haben wir Handschuhe an, dreckige Finger oder dreckige Hände, und dann meckert die Pumpe, dann lege ich auch halt doch einfach den Rand. Also insofern dann sehe ich mich schon ein bisschen auf nach dem Motto, was willst du jetzt schon wieder, Pumpe, ne? Oder dann spreche ich mit der Pumpe wie mit einem Kind, so nach dem Motto, ich will jetzt nichts von dir hören, ich will einfach meine Ruhe haben.
Yeah. So this was really striking, these comparisons to childlike behavior, and that you only want to be left in peace. And as we can see here with Joachim, the pump doesn't speak, but it's addressed in these constructed dialogues. Finally, to close the data session, as I would like to call it, I have Klaus's account, and because Klaus is doing so many pauses and the overall audio is like 2.5 minutes long, I'm just going to read it to you, because the point of the medical devices being an annoying part in interaction is coming through in this interview interaction as well. So Klaus is saying, good question to my question, if he sometimes speaks to his devices. If you really want to know that exactly, well, what do you, stupid thing, want again? When an alarm comes, that can happen sometimes. Yes, not frequently, but yeah. And then I say, yes. Do you also sometimes say nice things to your pump? And Klaus says, no, only when it annoys me. So this is one account representing very many accounts in my interview corpus, where people say they talk to their machines, they interact verbally with their medical devices, but only to scold them, only if they annoy them, and to tell them that they are annoying. So in these negatively framed topically negatively framed interactions. So here are my, as I said, very early on, maybe tentative observations of what is happening in these constructed dialogues, where the pumps might get a voice, or might get a sound, or might not get any kind of participation in the dialogue at all. As for the devices as having a voice, it's interesting to look at the gendered pronouns. In German, we have er, sie, es, he, she, it. And we find all of them depending on what specific part of this overall system between glucose monitoring device, insulin pump, catheter, or the program running, the communication between all three of them, the algorithm, what is addressed. So he is usually the algorithm, she is usually the pump, it is usually the system people talk about. Yeah. And as I said, what is observable is that there is rather colloquial language. So we find modal particles, interjections, conversational elements on behalf of the pumps, yeah, interacting with their humans in constructed dialogues. We have rather simple sentence structure. We have, in all cases, the language of proximity. So no pump is saying Sie, like the formal you in German, to their human in these constructed dialogues. And one participant told me that wir duzen uns, we use you, the pump and I, with each other, showing also the relational proximity as well. As for the prosodic features, I'm really interested in your opinion, because apart from this one example where I think it was really striking, the Britta example, where she said, yeah, we have to deal with this and we need to work on this. I feel that prosodically, not a lot was happening in the other accounts, but maybe we also need to have a closer look and do like prosodic analysis for this. When we look at devices as beeping and vibrating machines or as silent interlocutors, we can see that it is a very one-sided constructed dialogue. Interactions are determined by humans. And in the interview, some participants told me, well, why would I interact or talk to them? Because they don't have a voice, or they can't understand, they can't hear me. Yeah. So this aspect of the machine not having a specific voice is translated, I think, into these constructed dialogues where the devices are there and they are the alter in interaction, but they can't say anything. They can't defend themselves or do anything, or they just beep or vibrate, which is their mode of communicating. And the overall tentative observation is that devices in these constructed interactions, ordered in this specific kind of way, having a voice, beeping, or silent interlocutors, still are considered to be either supervisors, so they can be recommending something, demanding something. They are constructed as collaborators, specifically when they talk about we need to do it, we need to manage this. So the patient or the human and the device collaboratively together, or, and this is a very big part of the corpus, as I already mentioned, a nuisance. So the device is complaining, as being annoying, or as being treated like a quote-unquote child. So thank you for your hopefully broad and helpful comments and questions.